Hi everyone. I just thought as something different before my video today, I thought I'd show you what I got for my birthday. I got myself this action cam. That's right, it's a Kaiser Bass X400 action camera, and I thought, well, being a man of action like most wargamers, I thought this should revolutionise the way I do my YouTube videos and make recordings of the war games I go to. So I thought, let's put it through its paces and see what you make of it. Okay, so let's check it out. And hi everyone, it's me again, Brian Smith, and this is my brew mug. Tea, nothing like it. And I'm wearing my fancy going to town clothes, as I had to go to town today. Now, those of you who have stuck with me after my radically different intro, well, welcome. Now, it's been a few months since I've done my last video because I've had a few dramas to sort out involving travel interstate, funerals, aged care facilities, lots of government paperwork, but now everything is back to normal for the time being, so that's good. Now, what I wanted to cover today was scenery and terrain and my own sort of views on that sort of thing. So what is scenery and what is terrain? Well, as we know in wargaming, terrain is something that you can use to move your miniatures around, whether they be obstacles or cover or anything like that. 2 or 3 books with a blanket over them, well, that's terrain. A pile of rocks from the garden, that can be terrain. But what makes that different from scenery? Well, the aesthetic of it, isn't it? Terrain is functional, whereas scenery is nice to look at. So what I thought I'd cover today is just a few of my own ideas and things I've done, and just to throw a few topics up there that people might find interesting and might actually inspire people to do a bit of their own terrain and scenery. So to kick things off, first I'd like to say thanks very much to Palmer from Heresy Productions, who gave me a shout out the other month. Sorry I haven't had much of a chance to catch up on his videos, but I was just doing a bit of therapeutic scenery construction the other day and I was catching up on Palmer's videos, and yeah, it was really good to watch them. And also to Wargaming with Gary. I always find Gary's Wargames chat and the things he's doing to be very interesting. And congratulations on your decking project. He's a man after my own heart. But last but not least, hello to my niece Alana. Because if it wasn't for you, Alana, I wouldn't have pulled the finger out and bothered to make my next video. It's because Alana's been very keen to get another video for me out there so she can look at it. So, let's begin. Now, a toilet roll. My daughter the other day came up to me and said, Daddy, what can we do with a toilet roll? I want to make something. And I thought, well, what can't you make out of a toilet roll? Binoculars, all sorts of things. But I had a think and I thought, what can you make out of a toilet roll? Well, just for this video, I just quickly whipped something up and I just put together a bit of a storage tank thingy. It's a bit rubbish, but I thought I just wanted to see, just stretching the boundaries of what you can do with a toilet roll, given the fact that you've only got what's in your bits box and costing you nothing. So what I've got here is a bit of a notional fantasy fuel tank. It's made of a toilet roll. some alfoil wrapped around it, some paper stuffed inside to try and make the ends bow out. That didn't work very well. Some bent straws, some cardboard base, a couple of coffee stirrers for planking there, and the ubiquitous cat litter, etc. from my bits bucket, and a lovely coating of the old tiling grout on the base. So cue the stills. So yeah, that was just to show you what I've made out of a toilet roll during the last week or so. And yeah, because the whole thing with terrain and scenery is you're only limited by your imagination. Now with scenery and terrain, it's all too easy as you get older just to fork out cash if you haven't got the time or the inclination, because there's some excellent scenery out there, honestly. I mean, just check out dioramas and that sort of thing on YouTube videos. There's just any amount of fantastic scenery out there. But buying scenery doesn't really give me any sort of satisfaction. I've always liked to make it myself. What can you do with garden rocks? Well, here's an example of what I did many years ago with some garden rocks. Cue the still. Yep, and you know, just a bit of arrangement on a base, a bit of dry brushing, and you can get a really nice practical piece of scenery for use with multiple scales. And what else can you do? Well, I've done a new little section of my video this time called 1 Minute Workshop, and in there I'm just quickly showing you in a minute what you can do with coffee stirrers. Big surprise ahead there. Now, scenery and terrain. I find that there is nothing more satisfying than making your own scenery and terrain out of just whatever you've got lying around, especially if you have some practice and you start to do it well. It costs you nothing. My toilet roll contraption here cost me $0, as I was just using inexpensive things I've had lying around for years. But what else can you use? Well, matchsticks. They must be one of the most useful scenery tools I've had. You can make anything out of them, anywhere from star pickets to window frames, ammunition boxes, plus anything else you can make out of timber. I've salvaged this drink tin, must be an energy drink or something. I think once I put a few rounded ends on that, that could make a really nice gas cylinder. So I'll keep that to one side. And I was going through the rubbish the other day, as I'm wont to do, and I found an old powdered gravy tin. And I thought, you know, that could be useful. Because immediately I saw it, I was thinking perhaps an elevated water tank, a fuel tank, that sort of thing. Because one thing you find in the wargaming terrain is I don't think there's enough towers. We can all go for the old ruined building or church steeple, but there's not enough towers that you'd find out in the country on farms or industrial complexes where you can put your snipers, and we all love to put snipers in high obvious places. So stick with me for the next few videos, and I'll try and show you how piece by piece I'll convert this into something entertaining and useful. So yeah, stay tuned. Oh, and since my last video, my good friend Michael has been very generous, and he's given me this. It's beautiful. It's a British paratrooper helmet, and we had a bit of a chat about this, and it was very interesting that after the Second World War, seeing as people had a lot of war stocks to dispose of, turns out that this is a helmet that ended up in the Australian Army, as the Australian Army got their hands on a lot of ex-para helmets, and they were used in the Armoured Corps, apparently. And I can see why, because having the chin strap and everything, it makes it a very stable helmet, and I've worn this once or twice and think, yeah, I wish I had helmets like this, because unlike today where all the helmets are fitted and no doubt stable, when I was a kid back in the 80s, all we had was those old steel American bucket helmets, and they used to rattle all over the bloody place. But this fits really, really well. So I can see why they had these in the Armoured Corps for years. look, I could be wrong, but that's just what I've been led to believe. And the same way, Denison smocks from the Paras apparently ended up in Australian service for a few years, certainly in the early Vietnam days. But then, let's face it, armies recycle gear, don't they? Everyone recycles. I mean, where did German helmets end up? In the Argentinian army for many, many years after World War II. They all had German steel helmets. It's just equipment, you use it. But nonetheless, Michael, thank you very much. This is wonderful, and I always keep it near me for wargaming inspiration, because old army equipment is always handy for wargaming, somehow. Now, of course it is. Now, if any of you have watched any of those fantastic videos by Luke Towan at Boulder Creek Railroad, that inspired me to make some trees. And this is just made out of dowel in the base, this 10mm dowel, and chopstick, just a disposable chopstick from the food courts when you go to shopping centres in the cities and that sort of thing. I've kept my chopsticks over the years because they're handy. I can use chopsticks. I find them great to eat with. But yeah, I got a few of my old chopsticks and cleaned them up, and they are the top half of my pine trees inspired by Luke Towan, and I'm pretty happy with the effect on those. And the cost to make this was negligible, really, and that's the thing. Some of my best scenery has cost me very little at all to make, and I think everyone should be inspired to do the same thing. Right, well, following that 1-minute workshop, I hope you all found that entertaining. Now, the scenery in the last part of that, showing you just a suggested use for some of your H-bars, your steel girders there, was just a bit of scenery. Now, what I had was my friend Michael once again gave me some fantastic just MDF scenery he got from Poland, and this is just, I've given it a quick undercoat of spray paint, but you can see it's just a corner of a ruined building, a bit of a shell. And then what you do is you enhance it. So as you can see here, I've enhanced this by just putting some flooring in, which comes from scrapbooking paper from scrapbooking shops. My wife is want to inhabit occasionally, and that gave me ideas in the past, so I got some sheets of scrapbooking paper for flooring. The girders, as you see there, and a bit of magic sculpt putty there can make the bend in that, as well as just rubble from my rubble tin, various bits and pieces. I got a bit carried away, as one does. I had some leftover putty there, so I thought, oh, I'll make a little sink. So I made a little sink in the corner there, which doesn't look too bad. And my daughter was giving me ideas, and she said needed pictures, so I got a few little propaganda pictures printed out and made some frames out of some old scrap. And there you go, there's a bit of scenery, which is also terrain, because it's too easy to go down the path of turning your scenery into almost display quality dioramas. Now, I'm not really into that, because as you see, you want scenery where you can position your miniatures and that they're not being obstructed too much. I mean, there's a little bit of rubble here for effect, but basically, I mean, I can put miniatures on every floor of this building and it's still got a tactical use. So that's the thing, it's very easy to get carried away. I mean, it's all very nice to say I want a really realistic looking piece of scenery, but don't forget you want something that's practical and useful, because if you can't use a piece of scenery, you're just going to end up putting that in the back of the cupboard and not bring it out except to show people what you did 15 years ago, just as a bit of a display, and you won't use it. I think it's all more important to make a nice piece of scenery which, yeah, it can be displayed, but you know you're going to use it again and again and not just leave it collecting dust in a cabinet somewhere. So that's my philosophy, is by all means make your terrain and scenery really nice, but don't forget to make it practical as well. Yes, and I know, the girders are in the wrong place. Well, it was just an example. I mean, I've put them where the window frames are for a start, so it's all completely wrong, but I just wanted to promote some ideas of how it might look. You know, it's really just to give you an idea of what the girders could look like if you wanted to use them as a superstructure for like a building under construction or a semi-demolished building, that sort of thing. And I think they've turned out okay. Alright, it's all been a bit quick because I just want to get this video made, but I think, you know, given the fact that it's all just completely blurry to me from here, I think it just looks fine. So yep, another piece of scenery to go into the scenery box, and who knows what my next project will be. Trees, scenery, look, there's no end to it. Like I may have mentioned before, you can have very ordinary terrain, cue the still. But then with a little bit of enhancement, you can make something that looks a bit better, and it's still much more useful. And so that's why, look, I picked up a twig off a shrub the other day, and I thought, that's an interesting twisted shape, I'll make a bit of terrain out of it. So I've got a base and a bit of flock, and there you go. After an undercoat, a couple of layers of flock, dark flock first, light flock last from the top. And yeah, there's just a nice little simple piece of scenery, bit of grass in there made from paint bristles soaked in some diluted green paint. And there's a very simple piece of scenery, and the cost once again was zero. It's just time. Now here's an older piece of scenery, a slight rise, a few rocks on there made of polystyrene, just dry brushed. And this is just a very simple piece of scenery that might give you a tiny rise for miniatures to just hide behind. Yeah, just another piece of random scenery with a really crappy looking little tree on there, but I mean, I made this over 20 years ago. But it still sits in the box and it's still useful. Because if you make scenery, and this is only on a card base, which hasn't warped, look, scenery can be simple, it can look good, but you know, it can be sturdy. I don't know how many times this has been knocked around, but no, it's useful still. And finally, with those trees that are inspired by Luke Towan's pine tree design, you can come up with something like this. Now, once again, it's just an MDF base, a few trees on there, a twig from outside. I've just given a bit of a dry brush to highlight the uppermost surface. And then on here, I've made things like out of aquarium plants. I've got a few little green shrubs here and there. Now, I've got some orange lichen growing up trees there, or fungus. They're made of capsicum seeds. Capsicum seeds, don't underestimate them. They're just a perfect size to put on trees as some sort of fungus. Excuse me. Now also, going a bit nuts in there, I've made some toadstools out of pins, the round pins you use for sewing, dressmaking, that sort of thing, and I painted the pin heads and just dotted them. And on the other side I've got even smaller dressmaking pins, and I've coloured the tops of them a sort of a blue-grey colour to match an existing mushroom colour I saw in northern European forests on the internet. And also I've got in there just a little abandoned pack and a rifle, and there's an abandoned helmet over there just for a bit of, who knows, a little mystery storyline for this piece of terrain. What's happened here in the past, that sort of thing. But I've got some coconut fibre and tea leaves and garden soil that's been heat treated and sifted, and this just general homemade flocking. And there you have is a piece of scenery which is also practical to put on your table. I think it looks quite nice. But yeah, there you go. And that, once again, the cost to make this was zero. You know, just raid your bits box, you don't need very much. There's also a few ferns on there which I've made out of tiny shoots of a poinciana tree, and I just dried them between some paper in a dictionary. And after a few weeks you think, oh, I can use that, so you give it a coat of white glue, maybe a little bit of touch up light green or yellow paint, and there you go, you'll have some forest plants. Very easy to do. If anyone's interested in anything I've done here, just shoot me an email and I can do a mini tutorial on it. I don't mind. But yeah, cost of making this, $0. Well, there you have it for another episode of Wargaming Chat. I hope this has been interesting and has kept you on the edge of your seat. And next time, what will I talk about? Well, I've been thinking about skirmish rules and that sort of thing for a while now, to try something a bit different. But hey, leave some comments if there's anything you'd really like me to do. If there's something that I haven't hinted at, you'd like to see how I do something or what my opinion is, yeah, just shoot me a line. But otherwise, I'll have to work on something, something different again. And meanwhile, see what I come up out of my crafting box to see what else I might make. Because I've had some really good feedback from people on my barbed wire tutorial. So yeah, I'm more than happy to make up something just to see if it can be done and to use different materials. So until then, all the best and take care.